Hey guys, it's Baileywiki and it's September 1st and it's release day. This one's going to be all about the Gray Harbor docks for the 2D release. So you're going to see a bunch of stuff with new docks, some interesting new roofs and building types that you can deploy that are a lot more distressed and would go in a lot of different fantasy environments. You're going to see not only all the assets that came with this, but some other innovations as well. One of the things that's coming out now is now that we're supporting V13 officially and V12 at the same time, while we overlap those for about a month. But for V13 users, there's a new way to manipulate unlimited terrains, and it's super delightful. I actually did a whole tutorial on it, so I'll link to it in the description, but you should check that out because it's really great. It makes unlimited terrain super easy to work with, and let me know in the feedback for that tutorial if there's more enhancements you can imagine us doing. As for our 3D stuff for our advanced tier members, not only do we have a bunch of great scenes with this release, things that you'll definitely get use out of that you can see here, we're also trying something kind of interesting. We're launching board games. We've got some chess games, the game of and just check it out. Let us know what you think. We like the idea of playing games in game in 3D, and they're relatively easy to set up. So take a look at the 3D section with Swift and let us know what you think about it, and if you have ideas for other games that we should make, or maybe systems that make it easy for you to make your own game. Like I can imagine somebody loading up an image of Game of Life, and then you just need like the tokens and the pieces. So we could probably even set up just like the basic infrastructure for you to like roll your own games. So let us know what you think about that as a possibility as well. And as for Dungeondraft, you guys get all the stuff that went into this release. There's new patterns, terrains, paths, and lots of new objects. And with the new mods that I've been showing you, you get so much mileage out of all these things. And you can go in and see how a lot of this stuff was designed in Dungeondraft itself. So with that, let's jump into the detailed release. Okay, so as usual, where to find everything. If you haven't already, make sure you import all the asset and scene browsers. They're the ones that say import this within nuts and bolts. You'll find them for both 2D and if you're a subscriber to our advanced content, the 3D asset and scene browsers. Download those and those should really give you access to everything that you need. Now, as I mentioned, I have a little bit of V13. So everything here works on V13, including all the interactions amongst now that Monk's Active Tiles is working. But there's a special stuff with V13 I'll show you here in a second, or just check out my tutorial and you can see what works there. It's really the unlimited terrain spawners have had an upgrade with V13. We'll continue to upgrade that, but check out my tutorial to see more details on it. In the meantime, if you want to see the new assets, just open up the asset browser. You can always just go to New, and it will give you all of the presets first, and then it will give you tiles later on. You can also always go to releases, in this case 2025 in September, and you'll see everything from this release always in September. You can go back through past releases as well. So let's go through all the new stuff. We'll start with the inventory scene. So the first inventory scene is actually a building. This building is called the Boathouse. It's the Gray Harbor Boathouse. And there's a couple of cool things involved with it. If we turn on levels, we can go into the boathouse and look at what's happening here. First of all, it's set up with artwork so that it can go along water and kind of just looks like the water's going in. It's got these movable doors, which we'll talk about in a second. It's got working boats as well, so you can put tokens inside of these boats and they can move, right? So they've got like regions attached to all of them, so the boats can actually carry tokens. So what it also does is you can click on these. What these are like, these are just invisible tiles to your players, but they're like these wheels that, hook up to these gears in the mechanical room, and they'll open these gates, right? So you can either get into or escape through those gates. They make a large metal sound, right? You've got all of the different rooms labeled. And this is really meant for, it's a big space for battles and things like that to happen. If you turn down the lights, you can see there's lights that are actually deactivated until night comes on, just because it's not necessary to have that many lights during the day. But when you turn it down, you've got this nice mood, get some candles lit in the office and the storage area. And these are all interactable, right? So you can click on these, or many of these are interactable. You can turn that one on. So feel free to play around with that. Here's a little candle in the corner. And you can just drop this into any scene. So it works really well with the unlimited trains we've got out now that have like ready-made docks for you to drop it into. We also have a second building. This one's very large. This building itself is a prefab, just like the other one. So it's a 3-story mansion. If you just look up Gray Harbor Mansion, you'll see it right here. And you can drag it onto any scene. Now, this is huge. This is actually a really big mansion. So you've got a first floor that's got everything labeled. And again, when you're done with all the labeling, you can always click on this little icon. It's mat enabled. So if I'm on my token layer, I can click on that. I can delete all of these map nodes. They're also invisible to your players if you want to leave them in place. But it just gives you an idea of what all these rooms are for. If you go to your regions layer, you can see all the different ladders that go up and down and let you navigate around this, because there's quite a bit to navigate. In the coach house, this carriage comes with the prefab, but it's also movable or removable, so you can change it and turn it into a different carriage. There's other ones inside of that. You can just delete it. If you want to delete it though, just hold down Shift and click delete. Or if you want to, you can hold down Shift and click delete, or hold down Alt, and it'll let you move it without moving everything else around it. We also mark different ways in. Might be interesting for you to know as the GM. There's the main door, but there's also this little subtle side door, meant for like, I don't know, the bellhop or something like that to be able to get in. Otherwise, it's hard to get into this place, and your players will have to figure it out, right? Here's a 10-foot or 20-foot wall that's hard to climb. But there's also this back door in to where the workshops, the kennels are. And they can finally make their way into the yard. There's some stairs then going up. And upstairs, we've got a couple of things. We've got a rookery that they can come in, like see the crows or whatever. If you have subscribed to my Dungeondraft, you can come in and make changes to this map yourself, in case you guys didn't know that. But they've also got other ways up. Various stairs going up and down. They're automated, so your players automatically go up. That means you can maintain combat all around this building without having to change maps. If we go up to the third level, we have lots of servants' quarters, a little desk in different areas. I did include in here a couple of secret rooms. You don't have to use these, but you can. And the way that I would use them is I've got these kind of like walls here, but you can turn this into a secret door. And all of a sudden that's a way into this room. And then it's empty, so you can decorate it the way you want. So maybe you want something nefarious in there. Maybe someone's getting tortured in there. Whatever you want. Maybe there's a teleport circle, or a cultist activity, something like that. So feel free to use these secret rooms or not, but they're there in case you want to do some storytelling of your own. And it's got working roofs over everything. So just a great piece for you to tell some stories with. Next up, we've got our main inventory. And so this is going to be your Gray Harbor docks. So lots of different kinds of docks that are all distressed and set up in such a way that they can link together really easily and really well. You can come to any of these docks, like let's say you like this one, and let's say you want to have it raised up off the water. Just use the drop shadow tall and it will pop that up over the water. I didn't make that default because I didn't necessarily want to create separation where you may not want it. So when you do it more like this, they just merge together well. So that's how you would use these. They do come with a brush, so you can just like brush all these pieces or randomize through them and kind of assemble a massive set of docks just with these pieces. It's pretty great. It's a pretty satisfying thing to do. And then we've got smaller pieces that come with Gray Harbor. So you've got all of those wagons and carriages. They come as a brush. We've got all of these different bollards and cleats that you would put on docks and things like that. Just little pieces, subtle pieces, a bunch of different like ropes that you can use. And these are all smaller dock parts, right? You can make bridges, you can connect to things, super flexible. You got these posts or pillars. They actually come with the drop shadow if you use the preset version. And here you've got all these lanterns and lamp posts, right? So these are all actually presets. And if I turn this on, you can see they've all got lights attached to them. And in fact, these here are all overhead, and these are even composites. So they've got a underhead tile and overhead tile, and they're all set up so where they occlude the light at night, and it has, I think, a pretty good effect. If we turn down the lights, these all come on. Now the lamps all have kind of a blue glow. You can change that, right? You can even change the color of the lamp just using the adjust filter. You can change the glow to like a yellow glow if you want to use those in another environment. There's no background here, so you can't see them really casting much light, but that's generally how they work. And you literally just look up like Gray Harbor lamp and you get all of these lamps, right? I can grab them all, add them to a brush, cycle through them, and place them down where I want. These are meant to be overhead, so they would tuck under a roof. So if you've got like, a tavern or something like that, and you want to have a lamp kind of hanging on outside, you can do that. We also have these tileable paths. There's not really a good way to use tileable paths, but I dropped them in here just because they work, and you can just like link them together. So if you wanted to make like a long fence, you could do that and have a pretty good serviceable fence. We don't have the ability to draw paths yet in Foundry. If anybody's listening has a way to do that, love to hear it. Same thing with these. These are all tileable stairs in case you want to link them together. You do have some wood textures. These can be useful in certain situations, like if you're using Dungeondraft. So I just dropped them in there in case you want to make use of them. Same thing here. These are all tileable textures. These do come as spawners, so you can just spawn like this kind of mild ocean or sea, and then this more choppy version of it, you can spawn them. They're tileable, so they continue to tile as you zoom in and out. The Gray Harbor fog is super fun and effective. These are overhead tile pieces if you use the preset. You have different kinds. Some of them are set as overhead tiles. You can mix and match. So if I did overhead and just regular, and I brush those into a scene, and I can like make the rotation random, and I can make the scale really big. If I start cycling through these, you can as you put these into the scene, some of them are overhead and some of them are underhead. So when you have players then walk into it, they really start to obscure within the fog. It's a good effect. And if you want in the fog to have some ghosts lurking about, we even have some ghosts that you can drop in and they make a cool effect dropped into the fog. Now, if you want to surround a scene with fog, you can use these. There's a square and a rectangle one. These are fog frames, so meaning they frame a scene, and they're set as overhead. So if I've got a scene that's generally rectangular, I might use this to then drop into that scene. In fact, I think if I drop this in, yeah, it's automatically set to fill the scene. So it'll automatically wrap the scene in this fog. And it is an overhead tile, so you have to switch to overhead to select it. In this case, this scene's because it's square, it's better to use the square one. You can see all of a sudden everything's obscured by fog all the way around it. So it's just a really quick way to add fog without having to mess with special effects and other things that might have some more demand on your GPU. And finally, we have the Gray Harbor roofs and facades. So these certainly all come as roofs, but I've also turned them into facades. So if you just look up harbor facade, you get all of these buildings ready to go. And there's some specialized stuff here I'll show you in a second. But if I turn that into a brush, it's got all the walls and lights to be able to just resize, rotate, and put it into the scene the way you want. I really wanted to build this set because they're really distressed, and these work not just, I mean, these are just great for a fantasy environment, right? You're just going to have some distressed homes. Maybe you're in an area that is full of distressed homes, and so you want to be able to have some of these kind of textures when you're building. Now, I also included these windows. So if I look up Harbor window, I see all the tiles there, but I've got two presets here, and one of them comes with a light. So if I select that, it's going to give me a tile, and I can come to one of these roofs if I want to, and maybe I want the light to fall differently, so I'll hit H to mirror it, and I'll put it right there. And it's going to be right on top of that roof. And then I can actually come in here and right-click it on my tile layer, and I can actually change its style. So maybe there's a style I think fits better, like that one fits pretty good with that roof. And then if I turn the lights down, you can see there's a light built into it. It gives you this nice effect of this light coming out of this like dormer window on the roof. So that's just a way of adding some embellishments to your scene if you feel like you really want to do that. And you can add like You can add these chimneys, and they've got like smoke, and the smoke can even be animated. So these are just ways that you can like further dress up your scenes. Now, there's not really in it's not really in the inventory, but if we look up harbor spawn, we have all these like 5 different unlimited terrain spawners for the harbor, like the Gray Harbor. And they're set up to be either ocean or these different dock configurations, right? These are tileable, so you can really use any of these. This one favors more wood than water, so you'll have the ability to have a lot more area to like build like a town, for example. Whereas this is going to be more of like a channel of docks, or where the docks end and you have open sea, depending on where you have it in your zoom. And this one, same thing, gives you some good water space in case you want to take advantage of that. And you just drag them out, and this looks a little chaotic because of all of our buildings. Now, this is the current way if you're on V12 to do this. But remember, watch my video and you'll see a much better way to manipulate your unlimited terrains. It's basically like the next evolution of this macro that you're looking at here. It's pretty nice to use. If we did this for real, we would drop that in first, and then we put our buildings around it, and then we'd have a great map pretty quickly. Jumping into our scene templates, these are all unlimited terrain templates, right? So I can double click them and adjust their position. They come with the fog already built in, and the fog you can actually change. So you actually just delete the fog, or, and I dropped some other kind of single fog pieces in case you want to use those to augment it. But certainly get rid of the fog if you want to, and just go with the docks. Here you can just adjust the position, zoom in and out, randomize it to all the stuff that you've seen me do. Then you've got just other versions of that. These do have audio automatically built into them, day and night audio that sound like a docks kind of scene. But you have different sizes of scenes. This one's much larger. I think this one's, pretty small and compact. Same type of thing, just easier to use. Then you get into the scene. So if you don't know, what I do is I build my template scenes, then I start building stuff from those. Now, in this case, we've got this dock house that's on this lake, and there's this like eerie fog that's all around, and it's set up to be kind of scary and nefarious. Inside the dock house, your players can find their way into here, interact with everything that they saw before, right? Open and close the doors, that kind of thing. Here's a day version of that with some alterations to it. This is a dock house that's been kind of ruined, right? So all I did was took a roof and I applied the roof damage, right? If you open up this FX thing, I apply the roof damage, rotate it around a little bit, and you get this effect. Otherwise, it's the same map, just with some alterations around it. This has got a burnt damage applied to the wood here, just to distress this more, just to show you how you can tell totally different stories with the same assets. This scene I've got in my tutorial, but this has the full multi-level mansion in it, right? So we've got this basement level with some prison and cellar and things like that. It's relatively empty, so you can dress it up the way you want to. So it's got the mansion that you saw just dropped into here to a map. This one's a nice little vignette. Players maybe have a ship that they've just docked. You've got this fog cloud that's rolling in, and you've just got these little facades set up here to imply a little settlement, right? Really simple. You can make 1,000 of these maps really quickly. You can come in here and move the pieces around to kind of see how it was assembled. This is just a diorama tile set up in the corner. Change that if I wanted to. Real easy. This is unlimited terrain here in the background. This is using the same assets, but just building a swamp out of it. These are really great assets for building just these little walkways over swamp water. You've got this building sitting here. This is actually a building you can enter, right? There's a little place to sleep. You can actually change this to some other versions of it. I like that version. You can have an empty one if you want to decorate it yourself. This fire is interactable, and it works great in daytime too. Then we've got a couple of just Gray Harbor scenes. These are just, that unlimited terrain with some assets dropped on top, and you've got a really nice workable environment for a battle. And you can make some of these enterable, or you can just just click them, or take the users to your players to another scene that's the interior of one of these. But this just shows you how realistic and detailed you can make these things with almost no effort at all. This has some of those lamps, right? And these can all be extinguished. So hopefully it gives you some inspiration. Same thing here, another scene. This one's a lot more compact, just to create a nice eerie environment where you can have a skirmish. And the last one, this is maybe more inside the interior of Gray Harbor, right? This is in the town itself, maybe not on the water. You're just using the unlimited terrain to make the streets, and then you've got, you know, some of these facade buildings all around the edge, and it's surrounded by fog, because maybe that's one of the eerie things that's going on with the town of Gray Harbor. It's got this persistent, malicious fog around it. So that's it for the 2D release. I hope you guys enjoy playing with all this stuff. If you're on V13, you've got even more fun stuff to play with, so check out my tutorial. And with that, I'll pass it over to Swift.
Hi guys, Swift here again to talk about the 3D side of the release this month. This month, our assets are kind of all themed after board games. So subsequently, we're also going to be including a bunch of scenes with these games set up. And I'm going to talk a bit about ways that you can use them in Foundry. Since they're all just kind of tiles and props, they're not linked to any particular system in Foundry. This world I'm using here is D&D 5e, but anything will work in Foundry, really. So the first game we're looking at is, of course, chess. I've set it up inside a nice kind of tavern area that's just been scaled up hugely. And the squares on the chessboard are just one square in Foundry. So I've got these set up as tokens, so I can just kind of move them around. And then since the squares are squares, they just snap to the grid nicely. If you're wanting to do this with players and GMs, or just players in a game, there's a couple of ways to set it up. The way that I've got these set up right now is that the white side is all representing the actor white, and the black side is all the actor black. If I go in here, we've got black and then white. And what I've done is I've gone into the ownership for, say, white, and set all players to owner, which basically means all players can move around any of these tokens. If you preferred, you could, of course, configure ownership so that specific people own specific sides, but, you know, just for general kind of chess playing, I've got it set to everyone. Another thing you could, of course, do is create a unique token for each piece. That could probably have uses in certain situations. And, of course, another thing you can do is, since this is all just one-to-one Foundry scale, you could drag in your player tokens and then have your players take the part of board game pieces. Something I have done for these chess pieces in particular is if I go into the settings for them here, in appearance, one of the settings is lock artwork rotation. And I've turned that on so that they don't turn to face the direction of movement, basically. So I can drag, say, this knight around, and it will always stay facing in that direction. That's not really, necessary, strictly speaking, but I think it's kind of more... It's easier if all the white pieces face in that direction, all the black pieces face in this direction. Anyway, so we've got this set of a chessboard and then just your good old standard chess pieces. We've also got a variant of the chess pieces, and these are the Lewis set, which you might have seen before, possibly. They crop up from time to time, but these are basically high-resolution scans of a chess set or a part of a chess set that was uncovered on the Isle of Lewis. Very interesting medieval chess pieces. They are a little bit more difficult to identify, of course, so for these ones I have given each one a name. So if you were to set these up, then that'd probably be sensible. But aside from that, it's just good old chess, and it's a bit more flavorful, I think, having these interesting shapes, and of course all the kind of ancient carvings for all the pieces there. While I'm here as well, another way to allow players to move things, like tokens in it, that sort of thing, is by installing the module Move That For You by Adif. And what that does is if you right-click on a token as a GM, you get this button here that appears, kind of Move That For You token. And if you click that, then what that means is a player, or any player, will then be able to move that tile or token, depending on how you've got it set up in the settings. So that could be useful if you are using these as tiles, or if you have set them up as tokens, but you don't necessarily want to bother around with like permissions or anything. You can just right-click on a token, click that button, and then players can now move that token. Of course, it's not just chess that we've got this month. Let's have a look at some of the others. We have, of course, also got the Royal Game of Ur, which I believe I've heard is a precursor to modern backgammon. The general objective is that you're trying to get your pieces onto the board here, and then following a sort of circular route down the length of the board and then back off the board here. There's more to it than that, obviously, but probably going into the rules of the Royal Game of Ur is a bit out with the scope of this update video. There's a load of different sources for that online, though, so I definitely recommend giving that a look. I think it's a very cool kind of game, just because it's so different to the kind of board games that we'll get today. Along with this, we've of course got the tokens, which are based on historic artifacts that we found of intact sets. And then we've also got the dice. So these are just tiles, so they're basically just decorative. You would presumably just roll a normal d4 for actually playing the game. Though I think with something like Dice or Nice or something, you might be able to do something with this. Get some custom d4s on the go. Anyway, that's another one of them. Let's have a look at the third game we've got. And this third game is Go. Go being a very popular game in China, and it has been for a very long time, as I understand. I am absolutely no historian. But the general gist with this one is that you're trying to surround your enemies or your opponent's pieces with your own by placing them on intersections on this board. What I've got set up for the Go scenes that we've got here, since there isn't really a fixed number of tokens that each side has, I've got these token bowls, I suppose, set up. And these are just using the, if I go into the configuration here, we've got the trigger here set up to create a white token at this position here. Same with that. So basically that means that anyone can just double click on this and it'll spawn a white token. And they can just spawn as many as they like, basically. Because as you go on, you'll need more and more tokens. This is the same gist as the chess set in terms of like how to control these. I've got these set up as representing the actor white and black, but I've got it set up so that their name doesn't appear hovering above them because you can kind of look at them. And I think it just looks a bit better, since Go can get kind of dense with lots and lots of tokens in very close proximity. So there's a 19 by 19 board, which I believe is the standard board, or sort of the full-size Go board. We've also got a couple of smaller variations as well. We've got a 17 by 17 with the same balls, a 13 by 13, and we've also got a 9 by 9 board set up in its own scene. As I understand it, the smaller boards are for teaching new players, and also just for quicker games, because the thing with the 19 by 19 board is it's kind of huge, so you could definitely spend all day playing a game on that thing. Okay then, that's enough of the board games. Let's go have a look at the normal maps we've got this month. And here we are back on the Baileywiki server. So a bunch of these maps we've got to start with are some remasters of some older maps using modern techniques. Like this one here is now using splat map tech. That basically means that the terrain here on the actual map itself can be changed around using the splat map shader. Currently I've got it with snow everywhere because I really like the kind of snowy look. If I just say tint this a bit red, so maybe see what I'm saying. There we go. So this would allow you to change around the texture of any given part of your map, either using the inbuilt material browser here with 3D Canvas, or of course importing your own textures into that. Like if I just slap a grass texture on there, then there we go. Maybe turn that and repeat a bit. Well, you know, something like that. Let me set that back to what it was. There we go. And we're also making some more use of those background trees that we've had for a little while there, just because I think they make a nice kind of consistent horizon when you're looking at maps from a low angle there. So we've got this snowy variant of the map. Let's have a look at the next one. And we've got this grassy variant using the ancient castle terrain, so it kind of fits in with those scenes. conceptually, it's a very straightforward kind of map. It's just a big, wide open space here with some elevation variation and a water feature through the middle. Let's have a quick look at the next one. Next one is a variation with a different splat map on it. This one has kind of dirt paths and areas painted out in the forest. So this could be a more heavily traveled area or a kind of place where people are actually settling down, whether creating camps or structures or such like. It's probably a little bit more obvious if I show the other version of this map. And there we go, we've got the grassy version of the map, but with the different splat map so that we've got the kind of textures painted on here, or the roads rather. And of course, the thing with these splat maps, or any splat maps really, is that you can just open up the shader and paint them yourself, or paint on them. So if you would rather remove this dirt area, you can just paint over that with the editor. Or if you'd rather add in a little road, maybe going off this way, you can just kind of do that. The splat map adds a heck of a lot of flexibility to maps, I think. So pretty useful that we've got this kind of updated now to this modern sensibilities. That is the first set of maps. Let's have a look at another. And the next one we'll be looking at is City Passage by Lettuce. And this is, as the name might imply, an underground passage under a city. It's one of my favourite kind of themes, having a map that's quite dark and then having lights throughout it to get a real kind of contrast between brightly lit areas, like this office over here, looks quite cosy and nice, and then dark areas, like this passageway back here that you can kind of barely see, at least not on my main monitor. On the recording it actually looks fine. But either way, the general idea of like the contrast between the light and dark, really easy way to add a little bit of mood to your scenes. In this case, I've just put a massive light up above so that we can have a clearer look. We've got a central passage that goes off into the darkness that comes up through here. So you've got a very long, straight passageway, a little bit of blood staining going on. And then that splits off into a prison, a kind of guard barracks looking place with a storage room, and then the office for the officer, probably. So it's one of those places that kind of feels like it could be a real place. It has like a function, which I think is rather nice. But anyway, that's the first map. City Passage. Let's have a look at the next one. This one is the Desert Ambush in a nice little sandbox, which I think is a pretty cool touch. This one here, just making good use of a little terrain mesh here. These are surprisingly easy to make in Blender or your 3D tool of choice. I think I've actually put out a tutorial for that. If I haven't, I should get right on that. But anyway, so we've got this pathway through the desert, through this dip in the dunes with the rocks overhead, and in this slightly flat area up here where somebody set up some kind of a camp. Or maybe it's just some wreckage from an old caravan, really. As the name implies, perfect map for a bit of a desert ambush. This is another one that's using splat maps as well, by the way. You can tell by the kind of painted pathway that runs through the map there. That's another thing that you can do inside 3D cameras. Anyway, let's have a look at the next one. This next one is the Snowy Encounter Bridge, which is a rather rickety-looking rope bridge over a rather nasty-looking chasm. A lot of sharp rocks down there. Low visibility with the thick snow cover. But we've got a main road coming through here. It's again just kind of a painted texture there. A little side area off to the edge here with some ancient supplies. And a conspicuously intact painting. And then, of course, the main path across the bridge and then off the side of the map with a little bit more little tiny nooks and crannies for people to hide in down there. And, of course, a little bit of land down there in the chasm. You could probably fit a couple of people down there, though you probably wouldn't want to be down there. Seems like a bad time. And, of course, very tall mountain looming over it all. It's a very cool, very packed kind of map. There's a lot of stuff going on in a very small area here. I think that's a kind of good challenge for anybody who's making maps in any sort of context, really, is see how much you can get done in a constrained space. But anyway, let's have a look at the next one. This is the Snowy Encounter Passage, which could be the fate of people who fall off that bridge, or it could just be another part of this incredibly rocky area. We've got down here a cobble road travelling through, so this must be a truly ancient passageway, and then very, very sharp rocks on either side. This one, it might be tricky to kind of get people lined up on the edges here. Looks like it's a bit treacherous. I don't think anybody would want to be the guy standing up on this spiky rock here and shooting arrows down at someone, because if anything comes back at them, they're about to have a bad time. Anyway, a nice straightforward map here. And of course, I always love a snow map. This next one is the Market Village Encounter map, which ties into Lettuce's previous village encounter maps quite well. It's got like similar floors, buildings, that sort of thing. So you could just snap this on to one of the previous maps we've had with the village encounters. And it is, as you can see, a marketplace here. A bit of a kind of circular arrangement here. There's a bit of an implication here that the merchants are kind of together in some way. It may be that this is like a travelling caravan that comes in and sets up shop every now and then. But of course I could just be reading a bit too much into it there. And we've got the massive guard tower, of course. Various buildings nearby. And the stalls dotted here, there and everywhere. Overall, another pretty simple one. But of course, the thing with urban maps, markets, that sort of thing, is that there's a lot of stuff that can happen in them. Let's have a look at the next one. It's quite interesting. And this is the map World Map by Lettuce. And it is a pretty cool one. I mean, obviously I'm going to say that, but I do enjoy maps, and I do enjoy maps of maps. Things getting a little bit meta here, but anyway. This is the kind of thing that I actually see quite often in like community channels on Discords and sort of thing, when people are talking about using 3D canvas in their own campaigns. It seems quite common that people just grab all these buildings that we have and just shrink them down really small. Same with like trees and so on. And then just distribute them across a map, because nothing says the scale has to be 1-to-1 full size. In this case, we've got things like towns here, represented by clusters of buildings. Bridges and roads, just sort of suggested at. Small details, like campsites out here in the woods. And then, of course, things like these monuments in the back here, or even this caravansary. And then, of course, you've got things like flags that can kind of indicate nations or claims of certain organizations. Landmarks, that sort of thing. It's obviously not supposed to be a perfect representation of the world. It's very kind of stylized and abstract. But I think that's really appropriate for a kind of tabletop game map. And of course, we've got the island with the Aztec ruins. But yeah, this sort of thing, I think, seems to be one of the more popular ways to use 3D canvas, and I think I can see why. I mean, obviously I'm a bit biased here, but it's just kind of cool to be able to look at the map of your world in 3D and really just kind of like zoom around and look at it from different angles and kind of get a really good idea of like the scale of things, how big things are in relation to each other, what the terrain looks like from a given angle, and also a good way for kind of tracking movements. Like you could use, say, a flag like this as the position of the player party, and then you could just move it around the world. You could even do things like using splat map painting to leave a trail for where they've gone, or just place down objects or something, of course, so that players can kind of refer back to it, and then they've got a really kind of intuitive sense of where they've been and where they're going. But that's all just kind of stuff about maps in general. Anyway, that's the maps for this month. Let's have a quick look at the inventory scene. And here we are. The inventory scene this month is mostly the board game stuff, as you might have been able to tell. The chess set, each of the pieces is an individual mesh, but because of the way we've got things set up, that doesn't really impact the size at all, so it's not really a concern that way. That'd be mostly useful if you're just trying to do very different things with different copies of the same tile, basically. And then, of course, we've got the Lewis set. So these are not scaled as precisely as the actual chess sets back there. So these are here as tiles. This is kind of their full size. If you apply one of these to a token, then it's going to become the size of the token. But anyway, so if you're going to use these for chess games as tiles, then you're just going to want to like scale them down a bit. And then tiles, you can also use the move that for you module. I don't actually have it installed on this server in particular, but it's the same deal with the other one that I showed earlier. You right-click it, and there's a new button down here. You click on that, and then players are able to move it. And in 3D, they use the same kind of controls that you do as the GM, so they just click and drag the handles here to move it around. And then they can use R for rotate if you've got that enabled, or T for translate, and then they can just kind of move their pieces around the board however they like. You might prefer that, or you might prefer using them as tokens. It's up to you, really. So we've got the chess pieces, the chessboard, the Royal Game of Ur board. All the boards are scaled so that 1 square is 1 square in Foundry, so you don't need to rescale those at all. The slight difference, or the slight trick with the Go boards is, of course, they are set up so that you place pieces on intersections. So you want to put them like half a square along and half a square down, so the tokens land on the intersections, and then it's just the same as any other board. But we've got the 9x9, the 13x13, 17x17, and the gigantic 19x19, modelled after these kind of historic style wooden Go boards. And then the various pots and things which I was using for allowing players to spawn as many tokens as they need without you having to just have a massive pile of tokens ready to go. But anyway, that's the update for this month. A lot of board game stuff. I'd be really interested in hearing like what you guys think of, the concept of board games in general, whether or not they're the kind of thing that you want to integrate into your campaign. Like, I know that some DMs like to do stuff like they'll have, say, the Royal Game of Ur will be a part of the setting that their game is set in. So it becomes important to the campaign in some way, so that with things like this, you can then just play a game of it right there in Foundry, nice and easy. And then, of course, things like the Lewis chess set, reasonably well known as kind of these medieval chess pieces with their very kind of interesting carvings, like the Berserker gnawing on his shield, for instance, that sort of thing. But anyway, as always, I'd appreciate comments down below in the comments below the video or on the Discord server. As for now, I'll see you later.
Okay, Dungeondraft users, all the good stuff is in here. You've got all the harbor fogs. You've got the ghosts, the different lamps or lanterns. These can scale up a lot if you want to show the artwork. Different lamp posts, and then all these different roofs. Now, one thing that's great about the new system is you can turn these roofs into patterns, and then you can adjust the patterns and like make these dormers. You can like cut the roof. I'll just show you here. We'll change this to a pattern, and then we'll cut this. So we'll say, go to our pattern shape tool, edit the points. We'll put a point right here at the end. We'll grab this point and move it up like that. Let's say about here. Move this one up to about there, let's say. And now you've got a dormer. Let's move this up 1 level just so it works. And we can butt that up right against this here. And you just made a perfectly great roof in a different shape of one entirely. So really, really powerful abilities here, being able to manipulate these things and do stuff that you really couldn't do before. It's pretty awesome. You also have these windows. You can add these on top of your roofs and make new composite versions of them if you want to. You can, export those as new pieces, that kind of thing. All your carriages. Then you get into all your docks. So some really huge pieces. These all really resize well as long as you're making enough space for a token to move down them. Lots of new ladders at different perspectives, which we're kind of missing, and now got a bunch of options: bollards, cleats, all the ropes, the different stairs. This stair is actually meant to go into another piece. So like, for example, let's move this up to level 2, and let's move this on top of, let's look for one that's got maybe some space around it. And you can see it looks like now there's a stair going down into this this wood structure. So that's very helpful if you want to just create a stair anywhere that you like. Here's all the larger pieces of the docks. Again, these scale really well. They all merge together really well. You'll see in a second how we use all these together, but they're very, very effective for just kind of building docks any way that you want. And then we get into the actual mansion. So here's the lower level of the mansion. You can see how these things are created. I couldn't have created this without some of these new tools. You can see here, I took one of these large pieces, these large docks, and I turned it into a pattern, and then I just adjusted the pattern, right? So if I go to my pattern shape tool, you can see I just conformed around the artwork I wanted to keep and left the other stuff open. And so you create these really great designs with, really great detailed artwork without having to go into Photoshop and create new artwork. Here's the next level. If you go into your pattern tool, you can see all the places that I used this new, this is using the edge, the pattern edge fade module, but you can see you can add distressed, to a wood floor. And you notice like here, I took an object, which was a rug, and I just made it look like it was torn on the edges. So yeah, really stuff you couldn't do before, fading this dirt into the cobble underneath it. These are all things that you can now do with some of these new modules. All of this fading here, right? Being able to just put a path along, another terrain, all of this is all just faded path, right? Really, really great stuff. So just tons of flexibility. This is some of the roofs. Normally I would have to build these roofs in here and then do a bunch of cutting out in Photoshop, but now with these new modules, you don't have to. I just converted all of these roofs to patterns. I cut out what I needed, and now it's exactly in an exportable format that I could put into Foundry, and everything just works great. Here's the next level, and you can scan around to see there's some cutouts here for where the stairs are visible from the level underneath. Here we've got just the towers by themselves, exported these as individual tiles, and then your last level, right, with your cutout for the stairway is down below, and then the roof, which is just using the same techniques, but just coloring things and just really using all of the assets, but with all this new flexibility. Then you get into the unlimited terrain. So this is just showing you how these were made, how you can link all these pieces together. If I turn on the terrain brush, you can see that there's ocean underneath, and I can change that ocean to a different type. And you can just see how the rest of those were made. And then we get into the boathouse, right? So you can come in here, see how the boathouse was architected. Again, couldn't have built this without some of these new tools. And even just how we made these doors, right? So this door ended up becoming a bunch of patterns that we just cut around the pieces that we didn't want and made essentially an open door. So the amount of flexibility you've got now with the artwork is pretty outstanding. Here's the roof of that. So it was actually a bunch of roofs that were turned into patterns, rearranged, flipped, faded, and other things to make all of this stuff work together. But yeah, you make custom roofs like this, no problem. And then one more unlimited terrain dock, this one being more heavy on the wood. Again, this is all tileable. All these edges are tileable with each other, just like all the other ones I just showed you. And that means you can pull these into Foundry and then use some of the tools that I showed you in the tutorial today to make your own unlimited terrains work like this. So that's it for Dungeondraft. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. And now let's go ahead and do final thoughts. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this release, and let us know what you'd like to see next. And if you have any problems or enhancements that you would suggest to us for how we make some of this stuff work, by all means, let us know. We're always in active development for that. And in the meantime, thanks everybody for your support of the channel, for everything that you do for us so that we can continue to give you guys all this great content on Foundry. And in the meantime, I hope you have fun making maps.